guys, I'm Bethany.
And I'm Kristen.
And this is Looking for the Middle.
CouchCast edition.
First CouchCast of season 6.
I haven't got to say my little
She's so excited.
tagline in a couple months now.
Okay, so this CouchCast is a little bit different because if you follow us on Instagram, you may have already known that we were doing it. Kristen and I went to South Carolina over New Year's. Stay in this cute little guest house. That's not the point. Anyway, focus. While we were on our way up, while we were on our way up there, it's kind of become our tradition is while we're in the car on a road trip, we ask, we put up a question box on our stories and you guys ask questions and we answer them while we're driving. So this question was one of those that came in and we were like, this is actually way more than, 60 seconds you get at a time to record on Instagram. So we were like, ooh, we'll do a CouchCast and we put on our stories. Hey, we'll answer this in our first one back from the break. So here we are. We are going to do that. Kristen has the question in front of her, I think, because I don't have it. Okay. I remember the gist of it, but not all of it.
So here's the question.
Yes.
She asked, how do you honestly say what you want in a dating relationship when it differs from what the guy you're with wants? So for instance, maybe you want to meet at a different place for dinner, all the way to serious stuff like different physical boundaries.
Okay.
How do you vocalize your differing opinion?
I think how you do it is graciously, kindly. I think if it's like you want Mexican for dinner and he wants Italian, well, I think relationships are about serving. They're about being selfless. They're about whatever. So unless you're like allergic to tomatoes, actually there's tomatoes at Mexican places in the salsa. I don't know. What's something that's only in Italian food? Oregano.
Gluten?
Unless you're allergic to oregano, go get the Mexican food or go get, I don't know. I can't remember who wanted Mexican and who wanted Italian now.
This is what happens when Bethany has an allergy. She doesn't think through ahead of time.
Yeah. So my point being, those things maybe don't say what you want as often as you would like to on those things.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're looking too for both of you to have give and take.
Exactly.
So if you constantly feel like you're having to give, then that's something to evaluate. If not though, and he's like, oh yeah, like I picked last time, where do you want to go this time? Or oh hey, like I know you really wanted to go to this, and yeah, this sounds good, but like we'll go there tonight and then we can go this place next week.
Or
it's
even
compromise.
If he's not saying that, you can say, okay, yes, let's go to Olive Garden tonight, but next week, can we go get tacos? Because I've just really been craving tacos. That's fine to say.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I do want to distinguish between here, because I think as girls, we are tempted to become the bad part of this. There is a very distinct difference between being selfless and doing what your boyfriend wants, and in those ways, being selfless in that and serving him and seeking his good. Even if it's not what you want, what you would prefer, there's a very distinct difference in that and changing what you like solely to please him. The outcome is the same. You go get Italian food. The method of it is very different. And I think as girls, we fall into that second camp of, oh, well, and I'm using the food analogy here, but this translates into other things of, we're going to change those things so that he will still like us, when in reality, it's fine to not like the same things. It's about both of you serving the other one.
Mm-hmm. And I think that makes me think of like when we interviewed Jared last season we asked him how important it was to have stuff in common. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how him and his wife, Valerie, they fell in the camp of they didn't have a whole lot in common, but they cared more about spending time with each other. So they would each do things with the other one that the other one wanted to do just because they wanted to be with them. Yeah. And so there's this sense of like, it's okay to be different, and you don't need to be a carbon copy of your boyfriend. And if he's giving you the impression that the only way he's going to stay with you is if you only ever do things that he wants to do and you have all the same interests as him and he never wants to, that's another issue. Like that needs to be addressed. Yeah. Because
if you're asking, well, how do you talk about this stuff? Because you're afraid to bring it up, or you're like, oh, I don't know how to, it's causing all this anxiety of like, I don't know how to have anything different from him. I think that's a separate issue that either needs to be addressed because he's being controlling, or you have a somewhat skewed view of what relational compatibility looks like. Because true relational compatibility is two people serving Jesus who are willing to lay down their own desires for the other person and trying to outdo each other in doing that for the other person. It's not one running over the other one. And like when we talked to Jared, I think his example was his wife loves yard work and gardening and landscaping and all that stuff. And so he does those things with her because he loves her. He never pretends to love landscaping and gardening. He may have grown to enjoy it more, but he never said, oh, I always liked that too. Or yeah, let's do that. That's one of my favorite things. Or for the two of us, going hiking all the time. Well, I gladly go hiking with a boyfriend every once in a while because he likes it and it's something he enjoys doing, and I want to go do that with him and take part in that. Yeah, I would.
It's on air, people.
Every once in a while. But will I ever be like, oh, yes, I have loved hiking and it's my favorite thing to do? No. But you also don't have to go and complain the whole time and remind him how much you dislike it.
Yeah, that's the other thing too that's kind of frustrating. I've been in situations where like I dated this guy, and every time we watched a movie, he picked.
Yeah.
And he had terrible taste in movies, but I just wanted to hang out with him. So I was like, whatever. But it got old after a while. Yeah. And then he finally agreed to let me pick the movie, which I was like, what a shock. He complained the entire time of how serious? Bored he was and how predictable and how and I'm thinking, we watched Dumb and Dumber. I'm sorry.
It's a funny movie.
Okay, I do not think that movie's funny. Y'all can come for me. I don't care. I'm not a fan of stupid funny though.
Okay.
Like The Office is honest. It shocks people that I like The Office because I'm normally not one for stupid funny, which they're not. It's all
Will
stupid.
Ferrell's not your favorite?
No, can't stand him. Can't stand him.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey, not a fan. And so, but it was so frustrating because I'm like, I've watched so many movies that you wanted to watch, and I haven't sat here and complained the whole time. And then I want to watch, The Proposal, which is still a funny movie.
It is.
And you want to complain the whole time. And so it was so deflating of I feel like I've tried to be a good girlfriend in this, and then I would really like to see you do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so the same goes for you of hey, if he's had a really good attitude when you wanted to go to Target and walk around, then you need to have a good attitude when he wants to go to Bass Pro Shop. Whatever. I'm just making stuff up. And wants to look at guns or camping gear, and you're like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to go camping? All this stuff. Just having a good attitude is just as important, I think, when you're addressing these differences.
Yes. And so I think all of that applies when we're talking about preferences. Nothing we have talked about up to this point has any scriptural basis. Target or Bass Pro Shop. Not really in the Bible. So that approach, I think, applies to anything with that, whether it's like she said, where we want to go eat. I don't know if she said go eat, just go different places or whatever. Now, if we're going to move to the more serious, though, talking about physical boundaries and different things like that, I think those conversations, you need to stick to your guns. If you have scriptural convictions about something, you want to know now whether or not they differ. Even if that leads to a breakup, which is not the ideal, it's not what you want, you would rather know that now than down the road to find out and wish you had talked about it. And we actually, if you listen to next week's CouchCast, which you really should make sure you don't miss, we are interviewing Kristen Priest from Bear with Kristen on Instagram, and we actually took all of you guys' questions about boundaries and sexuality, and we talked with her about them. That is what her Instagram is to offer a biblical worldview on sexuality. So we talked to her, and one of the things we talked about was boundaries and when to talk about that and how to talk about it. And we kind of had a similar approach of, it's fine, give the guy time to bring it up, let him have that, room, but these things are important enough that they need to be talked about, even if you have to bring it up. So if the question is coming from that point of, okay, I'm having to bring this up now, how do I do it? I think you just bring it up graciously, you bring it up humbly, you bring it up not from an accusing or defensive place, but keep in your mind that the reason you're talking about this is that you want to honor the Lord. Mm-hmm. And you should both be wanting that goal. So it doesn't have to be this weird conversation, because you should really both be looking to achieve the same thing from it.
Exactly. I would also really encourage you not to talk about it in a way that downplays the importance of what you're talking about.
Very true.
Because I can be really bad at that. I don't want him to think this is too big of a deal to the point where he wants to break up with me. So if I can kind of like sneak it in, like, oh, let's just kind of, casually chat about this. But really in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a huge deal. Yeah.
Well, I've had that. And then I'm like, why does he not seem to be taking this as seriously as I want him to? When in reality, I set the stage for this to not be a super serious conversation.
Exactly. So like for her, the example she gave was talking about different physical boundaries. Yes, you be all the things Bethany just said. You be gracious and you be humble and you don't come at it as in like an accusatory way, but you also come at it from an honest and forthcoming way of, hey, this is my boundary. Yeah. And I have set this in previous relationships and I have never regretted it. And it is very important that I stick to it. Here's why I believe that, this is right. And it's really important that you know that. And it's not because I'm not attracted to you. It's not because X, Y, Z, whatever. It's just, this is the boundary I've set for myself. And, I really wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
What are yours? Are yours even? And you can't even assume like, he's a guy. He may have different or even more strict boundaries than you. You never know. You don't know. So, coming at it and really being open to listening just as much as you are willing to be honest about where you're coming from, I think is, and that's all coming from a place of humility, like Bethany said, of I want to be humble and knowing, one, I don't know everything, but I do know what I'm looking for here, but I also want to know what's important to you. What have you set for yourself, so that in turn we can honor the Lord with this relationship. And as much as my non-confrontational wired self wants to say this, or doesn't want to say this, I guess, you have to be okay with bringing this up, knowing that it may not go the way you want it to.
Yeah. I think anything like this, where it's a scriptural right versus wrong issue, you've got to stick to what you believe, stick with your conscience, and kind of have a hard line there. And one thing I would want to say, mainly to the guys listening, to everyone, but I think this normally happens more with guys, is and in that physical boundary area, but really with anything, the wanting to kind of push those a little bit, is maybe your girlfriend, maybe you as the girl, maybe your standards are more than they have to be. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But those are the standards that you've set. And maybe you have this standard that it doesn't say in scripture, thou shalt not do this, or it's not, you have that standard though. And that is where your conscience is comfortable. So to the guys, I would say, if your girlfriend has that and you're like, but this is not something that's scriptural, pushing her to violate her conscience is leading her to sin in that, whether the standard it would be sinful or not. The violating of her conscience is. And so I say that to guys, as you're dealing with your girlfriend, and maybe those standards are strict, but girls too. Like you were saying, guys, he may have more strict standards. Respect that. That is where his conscience is. And either way, pushing them to violate that, whether it's a physical boundary or any other, belief they have about scripture, even if the belief is wrong, if they are doing it, if they are believing it or they're following it or whatever in that moment, them violating their conscience is sinful, whether the thing is or not. And the Lord will mature them in whatever that is as they're pursuing him. And he may use you as the boyfriend or girlfriend to right that thinking. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I think that's such a good point. The last thing I'll say, and then if you have more thoughts, no, okay. Last thing I'll say.
I'm all out of thoughts.
If you're going to have this conversation, whatever it is for you, make sure it's not at an emotionally charged time.
Yes.
So for instance, you don't need to be having the physical boundaries conversation when you've been making out on the couch for an hour.
And you're like, oh, hey, you know what? We should probably talk
about this. You need to have those conversations earlier. Now, depending on what kind of conversation will depend on the timing in the relationship in which you will have these conversations. But when you can talk about them, when you are in a good right thinking state. However, objective, that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Objective state. You're going to be so much better off than the first scenario I just gave you. So I would really caution you to do that and not or try to have these conversations when maybe you're having a fight or having a disagreement and their emotions are high and you might say something you wish you hadn't. You really want to be in a calm, level-headed state to have these conversations, because I don't want to say they're make or break, but some of them can be. And even if they're not make or break, they can be really pivotal moments in your relationship, and you want them to be pivotal in a good way.
Yeah. So set yourself up for success.
Exactly. Yeah. So making sure you're not on an emotional high or low when you're having these really important topics brought up, I think is something to consider as well. So that's my final thought. We can wrap it up there.
Yep.
So
I don't have anything else.
Okay, great. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for our listener and Instagram follower who gave us this idea. This was such a good one. And don't forget what Bethany said. Next Friday, we will have a very special edition CouchCast with Kristen Priest. It was such a good conversation. We recorded this before Christmas. Yeah. But, gosh, she had so much wisdom and knowledge and encouragement on such an important topic.
Well, and just so you guys know not what you're getting into, but I don't know how else to say it. Know what you're getting into. We're calling it a CouchCast because we are taking your questions that you've sent in as CouchCast questions on physical boundaries and lust and sexual purity and biblical sexuality and all of those things. We kind of compiled a lot of those CouchCast questions into this CouchCast. And so I think it ended up being 45 minutes, maybe a little more. So it's a full-length episode of content, but because they were all CouchCast questions originally, we're calling it a CouchCast. So be sure to check in next week for our interview with her. So yeah, make sure you go ahead and go follow her on Instagram too. Her handle is Bare with Kristen, but it's Bare, BARE with Kristen, KRISTIN. Her name is Kristen Priest. So go follow her there. Let her know that we sent you over there. And then be sure to check back next Friday for a fantastic conversation. And we will see you then. But until then, I'm Bethany.
And I'm Kristen.
And this is Looking for the Middle.